Good morning. Welcome again to Morning Devotions, and thank you again so much for our time together. I want you to come with me today to the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel chapter 23, verse 8. Referring to Israel, she did not give up her whoring that she had begun in Egypt. She did not give up her whoring that she had begun in Egypt. Now, we find the same thing over here in verse 19. Yet she increased her whoring, remembering the days of her youth when she played the whore in the land of Egypt. And now come over here now to verse 27. Thus I will put an end to your lewdness and your whoring begun in the land of Egypt. Now, brothers and sisters, God is referring to idolatry. He's not referring to, the physical act of sex. He's referring to adultery, spiritual adultery, messing around with idols. And as he brings judgment upon Israel, and here in Ezekiel, he withdraws his presence. He completely withdraws his presence from the temple. He leaves the temple of God. His glory departs from the temple. And he says, listen, this all began when you were still in Egypt. And you have returned to that same adultery, that same spiritual adultery. Now that spiritual adultery is defined in other places in Scripture as the gods from beyond the river. When Jacob left Laban, he brought his two wives, and his favorite wife brought with her the idols from her father's house. You remember the story? She hid them under the saddle and said, Father, I'm in my monthly and I can't get off. And she hid and she stole the idols, and she brought those idols with her. Now, Jacob later found out about it, and he hid them under the Mamre tree. He didn't destroy them, he just hid them. Now, that's a scary thought. Now, here's the truth I want you to get. A decision to hide something and not destroy it in your life is going to bring consequences for the rest of eternity. I wonder how many men, they've hid something rather than destroy that sin. They just hid it, not understanding that children are going to go find it later. Somebody went back and dug up those idols and kept them hidden. And later, when Israel went down into Egypt for its 400 years, they took those with them. And they got replicated and they got duplicated. Idolatry became a part of their life. It became a part of Israel's culture while they were still in slavery. And after seeing all the reality of God, they still kept it with them. He said, you began this in the land of Egypt. You began it with the gods from beyond the river. You can look at this and say, the consequences of one bad decision. You can look at this and say, what happens when you hide something rather than destroy it when it needs to be destroyed in our lives? You can look at it in a multitude of ways. But bottom line, when we stop something, it needs to be put out of our life and destroyed, not kept around where people can pick it back up later.